Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to be talking about episode number 7 from season 9, The Last 10 Days. If you enjoy these videos, please do hit like and subscribe. The Last 10 Days was written by Marion Hargrove and directed by Bernard McAveety. As is always the case, there are a number of different storylines going on in this episode. One of them involves Jason and Toni, his girlfriend. She arrives at the house and she's concerned about Jason. She thinks something's wrong with him because his letter just sounded odd. And Mary Ellen is really kind of baiting her. What exactly did he say? And did he say this? And is he sick? And when he leaves, the girls are just kind of, Mary Ellen's rolling her eyes a bit like, she's pursuing Jason and he is potentially just trying to lay back a bit. Toni takes a gift to the Baldwin sisters that is something that Jason sent back for them. And then at one point while she is there, the phone rings. And eventually Toni answers it, and it is Corabeth letting her know that Jason wanted to tell the Baldwin sisters that he is back home. Toni literally drops the phone and goes racing off, of course, to find him. And she does find him. She finds him back at home, greeting all of his family and being very excited to be home. And of course, she commandeers him immediately. They end up on sort of a picnic, and she's really pushing him. In fact, she ends up proposing to him. And Jason's saying, look, I'm about to be shipped out to Japan, to the Pacific. He doesn't quite know what's going on, but he's trying to sort of just let her know that could be gone for another 2-3 years, whatever. They have no idea how long the war in Japan is, in the Pacific is going to continue. So she ends up basically breaking up with him because he won't commit. At one point, Jason shares with John Boy about some of his experiences and talks about, John Boy says, don't seem to be as optimistic as you used to be. And Jason said, well, I stood and had, buddies on each side of me get taken out by sniper fire. So we get just a little bit of that touch of what, different soldiers went through during the war. Not a lot of graphic details, but enough so that we get a feel for what the soldiers went through and what the people at home and what they did and didn't share with their family. Rose, Mary Ellen, Erin, and Elizabeth are talking about Toni and how she's getting older, and she's 23 and she's dying on the vine. And of course, why wouldn't she be busy pursuing Jason, who is a good-looking, eligible young man? The Baldwins see Jason at the Godsey's store, and they find out that Jason and Toni are kind of on the outs, that she's upset with him and they're not really speaking. They have invited Jason over for, tea or something. Then you see the Baldwins have an idea. Well, of course, when Jason arrives, he finds out that Toni has also been invited. And so it's very awkward at first, and they are trying to send messages back and forth via the Baldwins, and finally the Baldwins say, hey, if you're going to be here at our house, you're going to behave. It seems to be getting better, and then Jason basically says, says something that upsets Toni again, and she leaves. One of the other storylines involves Drew and Elizabeth. One point we see Elizabeth driving Drew into Charlottesville. Now they are driving what had been Jim Bob's car, which of course by the time he was done with it, it looked like a regular car, and it's yellow because that's what Elizabeth said he should paint it. So she's driving Drew. Now this is a process shot. You can see sort of the road behind, and it's all pretty much from the front of the vehicle. But this would have been done with projectors and that sort of thing. They arrive at Charlottesville. She thinks that Drew is getting a ride to pick up his bicycle tire. And she's telling him how he's been very distracted lately and doesn't remember things. And when they get there, it turns out that no, he is not there to pick up a bike tire. He is there. He heard about these new fighter jets and stuff, and he wants to enlist to fly fighter jets. So Elizabeth is angry and basically just leaves him there. The argument between Drew and Elizabeth just sort of continues. He comes by, he wants to borrow Jim Bob's books about aviation, and she's like, well, you can talk to him when you see him. And Jim Bob does sort of return home right after that and says, well, I just saw Drew. And Well, Elizabeth is like over it. She's, been arguing with Drew. And so she's complaining about men. And the rest of the Walton women are kind of like, oh, okay. All of a sudden, Elizabeth is old enough to have this idea about her problem with men. One of her sisters shows her a magazine, and Elizabeth is very interested in these new hairstyles. And so it is sort of suggested that perhaps a sophisticated hairstyle might get the attention of someone. So Elizabeth says, excuse me, I have some experimenting to do. Well, needless to say, Drew comes by to talk to Elizabeth at one point. And when she arrives at the door, she has this very sophisticated up hairdo and just looks all ready for a wonderful date. And Drew is completely tongue-tied and stunned. And as Elizabeth comes out onto the porch, and they don't really have a conversation, but she's just kind of, egging him on a bit. And eventually he does kiss her. And so we get the feeling that that relationship is going to be just fine. The main storyline revolves around Ben in the prisoner of war camp in Japan. Back home, of course, Cindy is very concerned about him, doesn't know what's going on. And as they hear more escalation about things going on in Japan, there's concern that the Japanese don't even seem to care about their own people. So why would they worry about prisoners, and that perhaps the prisoners will all be killed? And so Cindy's just kind of getting herself all worked up. She goes by to visit John Boy, who has been utilizing the little cabin that he writes at. And she talks with him and expresses her fears to him. And we see Ben in the POW camp, and he is still in this hot box, and his other fellow CB is there and kind of sneaks food to him through the back of this corrugated shack thing, and tells him that the commander seems pretty twitchy and is threatening to kill all the prisoners. And the corporal hears noises, and he checks on Ben and says, you're talking? He goes, well, I'm just talking in my sleep or whatever. Or, can't a guy dream? So there's some concerns about what's going on there at the camp. At the camp one day, the corporal takes Norm and Ben and has them shackled together and with shovels, and he's marching them out of the camp. And, they're like, okay, what are we going to dig? Drains or, our own graves? And so we see them over a period of time, going through the jungles. And this stuff was shot on the back lot of the studio. You see all these bamboo plants, and it was amazing how much bamboo grew wild on the back of the Warner Brothers lot in that jungle area. At one point, they're going down a little bit of a slope there, and they stumble because of being hooked together, and Norm gashes his leg. And so, Ben's trying to patch it up for him, and the soldier, the corporal, he's over there sitting, he's dug out a sweet potato and is eating that. And Ben kind of looks at him and goes, what about us? And so the soldier actually does dig up a couple more and tosses them to Ben and Norm, and then says, okay, get up, let's go, and continues to march them along. At home, we hear a radio announcement that is talking about the bombing of Hiroshima and how many, the devastation and the degree of life lost and everything over there. So, of course, the family is immediately concerned about what's happening with Ben. We get the sense that time has passed a little bit because Mary Ellen and John Boy go by Godsies, and they're talking about, the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima and then Nagasaki, and Corbett refers to it as a cosmic bomb, and that, but Mary Ellen says she's concerned. Yes, she wants the war to end, and maybe this will bring it about, but she's concerned about the terrible destruction of lives, and, is it worth that? And Ike speculates that, who knows if they have one, who else has one? And John Boy speculates that it won't be long before everyone has one, which is interesting because this was written in the 1970s. In another radio broadcast, it talks about how Japanese captors are killing their prisoners when faced with defeat. Needless to say, when Cindy hears this and John hears it and sees Cindy, he turns off this broadcast. Ben and Norm are continuing to be pushed through the jungles. At one point, they come across another contingent of Japanese soldiers, and it's a bit of a face-off, and we don't know what's being said between the corporal and these other soldiers, but eventually they let the prisoners live, and they move off. So they're continuing to go forward, and Ben and Norm continue to question for themselves where are they going and what's going to be the ultimate end to this. And then not too long after that, there's noise, and the corporal kind of hides them. But then he goes out and he realizes it's an American Jeep, and he goes running and he flags down the American Jeep. And of course, those two MPs get out and pull their rifles, and they're not sure what's going on. And the corporal runs back to Ben and Norm and unshackles them and gives them his gun and puts his hands over his head. He's basically surrendering to them. And Ben and Norm begin to realize that he wants to be a prisoner because he feels like this is his ticket out of there alive. Right towards the end of the episode, there's another radio broadcast. And we're all gathering around to hear because the president's going to be speaking. And the Godseys arrive, and the Baldwins arrive, and Toni's there. And Jason basically invites her in, and she says, yes, she couldn't think of anywhere else she wanted to be. And so they listen to this broadcast that announces that the Japanese have surrendered and the war in the Pacific is over. Of course, we are all ecstatic and celebrating. And Toni grabs Jason and drags him outside and basically says, okay, now you have no more excuses. And you know, what are you going to do? And you need to make a decision right now. And Jason basically says that he wants an opportunity to court her. And she can't believe it. She goes, okay, fine, then court. And back inside, as the celebration continues, the phone rings, and Mary Ellen answers it. And says a number of things like, what? It's the Pacific, and who, where, and finally turns to Cindy and says, it's for you. And she's like, what? And she's like, well, it's this person and this person and this person. And do you want to talk to your husband? And of course, we're all tears and crying and excited because it's Ben and he's alive. Our cast for this episode, of course, included Peggy Ray as Rose, Leslie Winston as Cindy, Mary Jackson and Helen Klebe as Miss Mamie and Miss Emily, Robert Whiteman as John Boy, Toni Becker as Drew, Lisa Harrison as Toni, and then Jordan Bennett, credited as Jordan Suffin, was back as Norm. This is one of several episodes he did as one of Ben's fellow prisoners of war. Walker Edmiston was a radio announcer once again. He did 6 episodes on the Waltons as an announcer, amidst a career with a ton of voice work. Also back doing announcer work was John Highstand, and he is credited here as Bud Highstand. And he had done other announcer voicings during the course of episodes. He was born on January 16th, 1907 in Madison, Wisconsin. He was an actor known for Sergeant Deadhead, Rise and Shine, The Glass Web, and he died February 5th, 1987 in Newport Beach, California. He did 5 episodes with us as an announcer. James Sato was the Japanese sergeant. He was born March 6, 1955 in LA, and on TV he did various different episodes, including Black Sheep Squadron, 2 episodes, Lou Grant, 5 episodes of MASH, Fall Guy, Knots Landing, 2 episodes, Heart to Heart, MacGyver, A-Team, Hill Street Blues, 2 episodes of Miami Vice, 10 episodes of the show Loving, Star Trek Voyager, Sex and the City, 2 episodes of Law and Order, Blue Bloods, 8 episodes of One Life to Live, 30 Rock, Madam Secretary, House of Cards, Grey's Anatomy, and more. In movies, he did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Die Hard with a Vengeance, Home Alone 3, The Thomas Crown Affair, and Pearl Harbor, amongst others. Then Saab Shimono was Corporal Kiyomo. He's the one who takes Ben and Norm hostage. He was born July 31st, 1937 in Sacramento, California. He had nearly 150 credits to his name, including in TV, Black Sheep Squadron, How the West Was Won, 2 episodes of MASH, 3 episodes of Quincy, Cagney and Lacey, Heart to Heart, Knight Rider, Airwolf, Hotel, 2 episodes of Remington Steele, 2 episodes of Knots Landing, Newhart, X-Files, Seinfeld, ER, etc., etc. And in movies, he was in Midway, Presumed Innocent, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, Waterworld, and he did a ton of voice work on shows like The Simpsons and Jackie Chan Adventures, and he also was a singer. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. I will be back with more about Walton episodes, more of your questions with an Ask Judy, and more special guests. Thanks for watching.